That's funny.
So we'll get started here. I'll have a few more people be coming in, but thanks everybody for making the call today. It's our 10th installment of our virtual Zoom series for the New Jersey chapter of the Exit Planning Institute. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Matthew Jack. I'm one of the board members for the chapter. And whether you're joining today from New Jersey or elsewhere around the country, we appreciate that you're here today. So one of the benefits of being in a more virtual world is we can be in many places at once. So got to take advantage of that while we can. And at some point this year, we'll likely be going back to in-person meetings. We'll keep you posted on that, but we'll likely continue to host these virtual events each month as well for those that can't make it in person. And for today's call, we're excited. We're going to be talking about conflict, and as it relates to businesses, to families, and even to family businesses, and how we can best diffuse, resolve, and grow from this conflict. So we'll leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, you can always enter it in the chat, and then we can bring it up at the end. But please, let's make this an interactive discussion. So if you have something you'd like to add, please don't hesitate. I wanted to introduce our moderators for today. We have my father, David Jack, who's the president of the chapter, and Jeffrey Cates, who's also a board member from the Founders Group. So thank you for moderating today's discussion, gentlemen. And I wanted to briefly introduce our speakers for today. So first we have Joe Strazzeri. He is a general contractor by trade. He hammered nails down to go to law school. He built and sold 3 businesses. He is an attorney by trade for the last 25 years for the firm Strazzeri Mancini out in San Diego, California. And he's also started a laureate program where they teach family therapists, attorneys, psychiatrists, really how to counsel. And they have about 500 or 600 graduates from that program, as well as being involved in the Founders Group, works alongside Jeff and leading business owners through all phases of transition to really help them make the most educated decisions. We also have Kyle Danner on the phone or on the call today. So thanks for joining, Kyle. Kyle grew up in a family business. It was the 5th largest printing business in Kansas City. He then became the owner, helped it grow, and then left it all behind. So he got a degree in counseling, and his love for working with family businesses inspired his own company, which is Solutions for Family Businesses. And since then, Kyle has guided family business owners and advisors to navigate the unique challenges that come from mixing family and business. So Kyle and Joe, welcome to you both, and thanks for participating in our panel discussion today. And without further ado, just wanted to turn it over to Dave and Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. I'll start and welcome everybody, as Matt had said, and thank you, Kyle and Joe, for being here today and guiding us through the discussion. So we all deal with conflict of all different kinds. And I guess the first question that I would ask to both of you, and Kyle, maybe we can start with you, is what are some of the most common types of conflict you see within family businesses? And can you explain some of the best approaches that you utilize to solve those issues?
So I think probably one of the issues that's top of mind right now for a lot of business owners are the kids ready? Are the kids ready to really take over the business? And I always see that when I look at something, the conflict is always much bigger than what we're first presented as advisors. And I see it really as at one end of the spectrum is, are the kids really ready to take over, and are mom and dad really ready to let go? And somewhere in there is the truth. And one of the very first things I ask when I'm sitting with a business owner, whether it's mom and dad or both of them, and they're saying, "Oh, our kids aren't ready. We're really we're not sure they can take it on," is like, well, help me understand what ready looks like. And starting with that question, oftentimes it's a very emotional response, and they haven't given it very much deep thought about what it means to be ready, what they think it means to be ready, and how is the business different from today than when they started it. And so having that conversation, just kind of unearthing, and you start digging into a little bit, and it starts to click, and they start to understand, okay, we now have to put together a list of what ready looks like for the kids. And then it's also turning around and asking the kids, what do they think they need to, what does it mean for them to be ready to take on the business? And so it really opens up and has a larger conversation. So I think that's kind of one of the overriding concerns for a lot of business owners these days.
Thanks, Kyle.
If I kind of piggyback on Kyle, yes, I completely agree with the premise that often there's an expectation difference. There's an expectation difference between the group that may take over and the group that has control now. So yes, let's assume that. Let's also assume for a moment that there were documents created at some point, either that they didn't look at in order to say, I'm going to run this and we'll see what happens. Or for the most part, there was some estate planning, let's say some tax, let's transfer things, documents to avoid a tax, like a family limited partnership, or maybe some sort of shift in stock. And inside those documents, they had the normal legal tools for rules stuff. And when conflict comes up, the family seeks advice, drafted the thing, they ran into conflict, they went to the documents, and the document says, go to battle. And they said, but I don't want to go to battle. And the lawyer says, go to battle. And then there's conflict that arises because these rule sets were created that the family never even knew were there. And now they've got these rule sets to go do stuff. So instead of tools for rules, would it be nice if those documents had some sort of alignment? So for us, remember, we kind of bend from the attorney side on the counseling. If somebody comes and they're already in conflict and they've looked at what the rules are for conflict, we get to tell them, if you all agree and you all have a pen, you can change the rules for conflict. You're not stuck for this. So let's go find alignment, and then we can change the document to be that alignment, and even put some resolution that if you run into conflict again, let's not jump to the argument and invite the people like me, they're lawyers, to make it worse, but instead get somebody like Kyle in to drive that alignment. The next part that I mentioned first is the expectation game. Whether it's the expectation of, am I running it? Have I invited my family in because I'm going to retire? Or because my family member, my son-in-law says, I'm now running it. My daughter says, my husband's running the whole thing. Why isn't he making more? What are we doing? There's been a lot of hints usually as to what the expectation is. But, you know, while we've had drinks, when we were on vacation, when we were at Thanksgiving dinner, you're doing a good job. One day it'll all be yours. But that goes in conflict with Joe, the business owner, worried that I will become disabled or die if I quit. And you know what? Like my favorite client pulled me in when he was in his 50s, talking about exit. And there was this older guy that was above the shop floor with his hand in his back pocket. And when I went up, he motioned me over. And my client said, yeah, go there. And I went over and he said, I know why you're here. It's to kick me out. But I need you to know, my son wants to take over for you. No, his son wanted to play on the exit. The father says, you know what? He has about 5 more years to be teaching him before I can leave. Clearly, they had a misexpectation. So what Kyle and I do often is it's almost never about what it's about. People give us a bunch of data to say, here's my position and why it's valuable, but underlying it, there's a misunderstanding. So the vast majority of the time, if I was to answer much more directly, David, it's driven because of a misunderstanding in documents or a misunderstanding of interactions. The people usually are good-hearted, but this misunderstanding has caused this conflict. If you can create an environment to talk them through that, often they already want to do what the other one does, they just don't know how to get there. Or they've had an outburst and they don't know how to ring the bell, especially if they're boys. Boys, when they outburst, don't know how to ring the bell. That's true for little ones, big ones, medium ones, and ones old like me. So that'd be my answer to it. And that's what Kyle and I are put in the middle of all the time. Remember, if you're a financial advisor, if you're a counselor, if you're an attorney, accountant, you know that stuff like this is going on. You just may love doing that work or hate doing that work. I have some team members who say when voices raised in the room, they remember being a child and they get nervous. Mm-hmm. I have other Italian partners who lean back and say, when voices raised in the room, it's my comfort zone, like time to go play. So thanks, David. And thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
What do you mean by ring the bell?
So I'll describe maybe my 20-year-old son when he was 6. And the same problem today, by the way. When he has an outburst, so he gets his feelings hurt, then he gets angry, then he says something stupid. Let's say he does that with my wife, his mom. Once he says it, he believes he's down the path because the bell has been rung and there's no way to unring the bad behavior. So now he thinks he's committed to justifying the stupidity. So the argument that ensues and the discomfort in the family is not about the underlying thing they were talking about. It's about the behavior and then the acting out afterwards, trying to justify. So one of the greatest things you can do is help people find a way to unring, to be able to say, like a 4-part apology will teach people. Look, at the end of the day, it's fairly simple. You're both upset. If one of you could, A, admit what you did wrong without saying anything about other factors or how the other person was involved, just whatever you did it, whether you're 1% or 99%. B, explain what you're going to do to solve it with milestones. C, say what you're going to do to make sure that kind of stupidity doesn't happen again. And D, apologize. The other side will say, thank you for acknowledging I'm in. Now to do that, you have to listen to what the other person is upset about. Just that one tool can sometimes completely disarm a bad situation. How many times have you been with your mate, your husband, your wife, your kid, your parent, when you finally get through to them and they say, that's all you want? Because people want to care for each other. So that's my unring the bell conversation.
I think this will be a perfect segue to the next question. Oftentimes family goals and business goals are in conflict with each other. So how does good succession planning adequately deal with these relationships and dynamics? So
who would you like to go first
with that?
How does good? I'm going to kick that over to Joe.
Sure.
I'll kick it over to Joe.
So
okay.
There's a small graphic we have, which Jeff can get out to you all guys, where it says, are you a business first company or a family first company? And I'm going to again go back to this is a missed expectation. In a business first company, by right of last name or birth, you're going to get a job and you're going to get paid this amount. If it was business first, you'd have to earn that right and probably be paid less than fair market and have to earn your way in. And that would be true about the other types of roles, whether it's being hired, what position, how much you get paid, promotions, voting, etc. The other part is the misunderstanding often about what your role is. Are you an owner? Do you actually have stock? So in the earlier example where it was the parents and then the son-in-law was in the business, I gave my daughter some stock, which is non-voting. Is she an owner? Does she get to vote? And her husband doesn't get to vote, but he seems to think he does. So understanding on the Venn diagram between ownership, family, and working in the business, where you fit in that, often somebody will go, oh, that's why it's been so difficult. So it's part that misunderstanding. As far as succession, how do I say this nicely? If when I first came to work in the business,
just say it.
I first came to work in the business and my older sister was running things and she wanted dominion and control over me because she did when we were younger, but I wanted to prove up and I'm now 10 years in. Am I allowed to be equal, above, or less, especially by performance? And is the person that actually owns the stock or running treating us a particular way? So it's this historic way of being treated that sometimes drifts into years later, either because when we were kids or how we first worked in the business, or remember 2 years ago, you forced that business decision, we lost $1 million. And then the person like me would say, yeah, but the 3 other decisions I made 10. So there's this stuff. Often with the work that Kyle or we do, it's uncovering that history and saying, do you want to be pissed about that? And what's the best thing moving forward? So again, it's first, is it a business first or family first run business? on these different factors? And second, given your history, does that predict what you have to do in the future? That all being said, the actual owners of stock need to decide, when do we give away control and when do we give away ownership, under what rules? Mom and dad own it, they get to decide, although they probably gave some away for others. But after the ownership shifts, these people are partners and they get to decide. And they sometimes forgot, because their advisor, they're a CPA, their attorney, they're a business consultant, never let them know that they could figure it out for themselves. Kyle, how would you answer that differently?
Well, actually, I'm laughing, Joe, because I'm going to share something from my own personal experience. So you're talking very much from a legal standpoint. You know, the legal documents dictating who has control. That is one level of control. I can say within my own family's business that the pressure, and I'm saying pressure from mom and dad, there's big, huge air quotes around that, because I think it was more of a perception than a reality, is that we were all supposed to be equal in the business. That as far as the goods, our salaries, our bonuses, what we took from them was all equal, even though our ownership wasn't. My brother was majority owner, and he felt that it had to be equal because of expectations from mom and dad. Mom and dad never said that to him. Okay, we had kind of a big blow up. So to what Joe's point, and kind of one of the reasons why I do what I do, is we had a big blow up around ownership, because we were saying, you know, front and center, that it's all equal. We're making decisions equally. We'll share in the spoils equally. It was never equal. My brother carried more of the financial risk than my sister and I did. And we never talked about that. We never discussed it. And so I think there's, you know, when you think about control, also keep in mind, it's just not the legal control, but it's also maybe that internal pressure people feel from either tradition or parents or other family members. I mean, we can say someone has majority control in the company, okay, and they're supposedly in charge. But if you've got a family member who is like that little kid in the grocery aisle who just sits down and screams and refuses to move, that really throws in the question, who really has control in the family? It's not just the legal documents. So it's also understanding where are some of the family dynamics that go on as well.
Yeah. And, you know, Kyle, I'm going to just add to that, you know, for everybody here, it's interesting because when you get involved as an advisor in a business and you're facing some business issues, oftentimes those business issues will never get resolved if you don't get past that symptom and get into what that family dynamic is and work through that. So that resolution of the conflict amongst the family members that may be 30 years old, that has nothing to do with the business, that business will never be able to get past that hump and improve until this is taken care of.
Yeah.
So.
And I would agree with what Jeff just said. At the end of the day, like I said earlier on, sometimes people believe that because of their history, it has to be a certain way, or because they're paying homage, often to somebody who's already passed away, or because of a set of documents, they feel like they have to do it a certain way. Yeah. It is so rewarding. If you're a financial advisor, business planning is no more than financial planning for a business, with all the same needs to look at goals and hair that you would have in financial planning. You just have some other maybe tax or operational issues, but the same family issues. So remember, it is very rewarding for any one of you to be with a family, to be able to say, it doesn't have to be this way. What would you like it to be? If there's a document, as long as everybody's willing to sign, you're good. If it's a way of treating each other, your history doesn't have to depict what you'll do in the future. And it's so rewarding. If you look at Kyle's face, he lights up over being able to help people realize that they don't have to live in this drudgery, this life that they painted in their head that they've got to put up with. Johnny's always going to be an overbearing pain. Susie is going to always take charge. Jane is always going to be the wounded one. That reality doesn't have to be that way looking forward. Yeah. And more often than not, they don't want to do that to each other. And you can tell with Kyle and myself, it's what jazzes us about doing this kind of work. It isn't the technical stuff that we do. It's this other interpersonal that, oddly enough, not only helps solve for the family, creates massively larger profits, and much more to do with the family from what you all do.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Well, you guys are experts in the field, and I'm sure that most of us, when we try to think of approaching conflict, we're thinking about the processes or the foundation of how we're going to operate on. And Kyle, in the background of your visual, you've got a chart that says EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And can you talk just a little bit about how EOS can help resolve family business issues to create healthy teams and thriving businesses?
Yeah, well, Joe, you teed it up perfectly because you talked about clarity. You talked about clarity about where the vision, where the business is going. You talked about clarity of roles. And that's one of the reasons why a couple of years ago, I decided to kind of really make this a centerpiece of what my business is. So about 80% of my business is helping family businesses as well as other non-family businesses implement the entrepreneurial operating system. And really all it is it's a structure and a process. So I'm going to walk through the model just real quick and then kind of explain a little bit how I use it in working with a family business. And I think it's really important. Joe hit on something really nice. Are you going to be a family, family first or business first? And so in EOS, we talk about what does the business need to survive? And ultimately, what the business gets, it benefits the family. And we do it away and kind of strip out all the personal nature of things that can go on in business. And so when we look at the model, we start with your business in the center. And we start off with the vision component, getting everybody 100% on the same page, moving the same direction. But you have that great vision, you need great people. So we go about defining what makes a great person for their organization, all right? Because that's what ultimately they're going to need, both people in the family and out of the family, to make that vision real. The third component is the data component. It's making decisions on that objective information, on facts and figures, not on the whims, the egos, or best guesses that we probably all see our entrepreneurial business owners make. Now, as we strengthen the vision, the people, and the data components, what we're doing is we're creating transparency. So all those challenges, all those obstacles, they become crystal clear. And that sets us up for the issues component, all right? You have that great vision, but you have to be great at solving your issues, calling them out, setting them up, knock them down so they go away forever for the greater good of the organization. The process component is making sure the most important work is done the right way, the best way every single time. That gives you an organization that's easier to run, easier to manage. It is more profitable and a lot more fun for everybody involved. And quite frankly, I think this is the most important piece of it, is the traction component. It's bringing that vision down to the ground and executing on it. It's instilling discipline and accountability, because vision without traction is hallucination. Without it, you'll never get there. And one of the reasons why I love this so much and I'm so passionate about it is everybody loves to talk about vision. It's the fun, sexy thing to talk about. But we got to get work done. And so the traction component allows us to get the work done, the right work done on a weekly basis to get to that long-term vision. So the other reason why I love it is it provides places to help families figure out what are the different issues in the business. And Joe touched on the 3 circles. And so when I'm doing a session day with a family business, which often includes family members as well as employees, having this up on the wall to say, is that a business issue? Is your son, John, who is not hitting his weekly numbers, all right, on the scorecard, because there it is, black and white for everybody to see, is that both a family issue or is that a business issue or some combination of both? So what this does, much like what Joe and Shelley and everybody do for the Founders Group, is to create a picture, a way to see it. This is another way in which to be able to see the business and how to help the family.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle. That was great.
Yeah.
Joe, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, Kyle, could you go back to that drawing for your slide for a minute?
Sure.
I want, just because some of us are so literal and visual, I want to cover a little piece. One of the things that he said within this, where it says family, business, and ownership, if you were to put numbers in each one of these, like 1 in the family by itself, 2 in ownership, 3 in business, and maybe 4 where it's family and business, family and ownership, but not business, a 5 where it's family and business, but not the other. And then when it's all in there, maybe an 8 or 9, people can identify where they sit and start to realize, what does that mean for them? And can somebody move? I cannot tell you how many in-law children that have no ownership believe they're in the center. And how many moms, let's say a mom that's not involved in the business, or in this case, a dad not involved in the business, one of my cosmetic companies, the dad is not involved in the business at all. He's clearly family. He lives in a separate property state. The wife has made it very clear it's her business. So he's in the top one, and he always thought he was in the middle. And the son-in-law said, "You never come to work." So it's just interesting to shift a mindset, to see something more clearly, to restart a conversation. It's not that it has to stay that way, but what is it? And what are the responsibilities that come from being there? Thanks a lot, Kyle, for putting that back up.
Thanks,
So
Joe. That
guys,
was
what
very
I've done,
insightful.
it's Gary Katz. What I've done in a lot of those situations is build up synthetic equity for, in your example you just gave, the son-in-law or daughter-in-law that's not a family member but's active in the business, and they're not going to get equity because they're not part of the family. So we set up synthetic equity programs, which are non-qualified, deferred comp, split dollar, et cetera, where the person's going to get money, but it doesn't dilute the family's ownership. So
Very
I've
much
done that a
so.
lot.
And Gary, to your point, once the family figures this out, they often then start to realize that a good, healthy business is run not by the family, but by others. In order to make this business be worth a lot more, families might want to take care of vision, but the working in it is a training ground, but not to permanently take control, but to have others work. Gary's mentioning there are alphas in our business that we need to keep to make this work, but the family's not comfortable with letting go of ownership. So could I do a phantom stock kind of a thing? Could I do a deferred comp? Can I get insurance for them? All the things that we could do that benefits our alphas to keep this train running without necessarily having to give up equity, because we might want to keep it generationally, or control. And SageMark does a great job at that. SageMark has been in the design side of working with high net worth families for a long time, way back from the Lincoln days.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Gary, for that. I'm going to shift it a little bit here. We've been talking about the business and the conflict within the family and the business so far. I want to shift it a little bit for all of us here in the room, because we're all advisors. So I want to put this out to both of you. During an engagement where there's a bunch of advisors involved, can you describe some successful tactics that you incorporate to effectively work with those other advisors during an engagement? So the conflict isn't within the business. It's with the other.
I'm almost leading down to having Shelley answer this, because Shelley teaches a half day, 1 day, and also a 2-day version of this course on building collaborative teams. But as part of that course that Shelley teaches, first and foremost, you have to realize how everybody gets paid. They're going to be protective over how they get paid. Threatening how they get paid is dangerous. Number 2, what is their lane that they're an expert at? What do they love to talk through that is going to not only get them paid, but they're going to deliver value? So those 2 things first. Number 3, almost everybody that's in the room wants to have a bond to the client because they want to hang out, maybe do more, and get good referrals from that client. So there's the can I be bonding. All 3 of those things can create huge amounts of insecurity if they're not dealt with. So first and foremost, you've got to deal with those pieces. Those things that each one of those team members is seeing as their way to have connection with the client. Connection with the client. And like in any other relationship, when you threaten connection, people act out. When you threaten connection, people act out. So often you'll hear, Sam is always a pain to work with. That's because you just need to deal with what Sam needs out of the gate. So you can assume these things. Hopefully you have a meeting ahead of time to say, what is it you do? What do you love to do? How do you get compensated? How are you going to help the family? And then what are your other lanes that you're really comfortable with? So the next part is, Shelley would say, decide who the quarterback is. And for Shelley, that's the servant leader. That's the one that takes charge of communication, gathering data, setting appointments, not dictatorial, but servant to the group, and start talking about roles. And I'll get back to my original thing. This is every time that there's a more difficult advisor, it's simply a matter of a missed expectation. Nobody wants to be difficult or seen that way. It's a missed expectation, probably over one of those three things or something else. So if you can deal with those things up front, or once you notice somebody being difficult, if you can sidebar, never argue in front of a client, never get pissy with each other in front of a client in email or live on a Zoom. Have a sidebar, wait for time, be gracious. And if you're in the situation where somebody's being difficult, your job is to kill them with kindness and be the most understanding person in the room and say, yes, that is definitely a way to see that. There might be a couple of others, can I talk about that? But let's decide together. And you can always say, we don't have to decide today. Often, if I might, the difficult person in the room is driving a quick decision to a quick money thing because they need it. And that's the most dangerous advisor in the room, the ones that needs a deal to happen now. So hopefully you did pre-meetings with the advisors ahead of time where you acknowledged all of their talent, all of their ideas, you incorporated what their lane is, that you understand how they get paid, and you've let them know, let's do this together, and they get to take center stage for their piece. But if you didn't do that pre-meeting and you're in the middle of it, remember those kind of key things that you would do with somebody you cared for.
Yeah.
Kyle, how would you say that differently?
I would say the only thing I would add to it is keep in mind that a lot of the business, so you're bringing in possibly a team of other people to help with an exit plan. Respect the existing advisor relationships, because the business owner may be very tied to their banker or their attorney that they've had for 30 years. And you're talking about the business and the future in a way that they may not fully understand. So it's having a conversation with the owner, respecting the relationship of the existing advisor who they trust, say, hey, I think for this project, let's bring in somebody else and here's why. What do you think about that? Are you comfortable with that? So it's not, you don't want to push somebody out the door because then they will, that threaten that connection like Joe says, but really call it out and say, here's somebody who might be able to help us temporarily on this project, and then they'll go away.
If I could add a bit down Kyle's path, clients have embedded advisors. Those embedded advisors are usually good sold people. That's why the client has them. If you want to take those good sold people and turn them into snipers that will shoot at you, start the conversation with, let me describe the things that are screwed up in your life.
Yeah.
Because by definition, it's the other advisors that didn't find it or caused it. You could say that very differently. You have great planning. What you've done is perfect for when you did it. And like David said, we need to update it. Same message said differently. So are you creating your old different good advisor? Are you creating your sniper? Or are you creating an ally out of the game? Now, mind you, in a very selfish way, creating an ally out of current advisors, even if they don't have the capability, the Stovall book, what got you here won't get you there, often the client will want to keep them and augment them. Sometimes the client will want to change. That's the client's choice, not ours. But that other advisor has buckets of clients just like this. And if this client has areas that are not fixed, that you do well, more than likely that advisor has a couple of other dozen clients similarly situated. If you play together well with them in the sandbox, they're going to invite you to their other clients. So not only is it good for good for your client, it's good for your business because they'll invite you into other things. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So a difficult advisor is merely an advisor that can become a great referral source if we just love on them better. As you can tell, we love collaboration. We call it a we-driven mindset.
If I can ask, Shelley, Joe talked a little bit about you, and I know you've got great expertise in this area as well. Do you have any comments that you'd like to share with the group about it?
Shell?
Thank you for that. Really, it's about there's like Joe said, it's a half-day program, so there's so many things to cover. But one of the big things that I think people miss on a lot when we're talking about collaboration is learning how to introduce each other. So learning how you want to be introduced, what type of clients you want, what are the most productive clients for you. Maybe they have it all wrong. Maybe they're sending you clients that really are sucking the blood out of you. So, making sure that you understand that and how each other wants to be introduced. It's really not about the credentials or all the letters behind your name. It's about that they like you and they trust you. And you want that message to come across, because the way that referral comes in is a make or break situation generally. The other thing is about process. You guys touched on it a little bit, but when you're collaborating with other advisors, you got to choose one process that you're all following. That's why it's important that somebody takes the lead as a quarterback and uses that process, whether that's the person who brought the relationship to the team or not. Y'all have to agree whose process are we using and whose process are we following, so that we don't have a client who's being pulled in all different directions and trying to follow different processes. So there's those two things. The other thing is always quiet confidence, and being able to be confident in your what you bring to the table and not having to prove yourself, and dealing with all the other advisors who do need to prove themselves can be a challenge. So
thanks, Shelley. Thanks for sharing that with us. Appreciate that.
of course.
I have a question for both Kyle and Joe as well. And we hate to beat a dead horse with this, but we are all trying to normalize our activities as we come out of this terrible virus. And I just wanted to ask both of you, what would you say are some of your observations about business conflict that is particular to the pressures brought about by the pandemic?
If I might, could I, Kyle, go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
So I'm going to connect that. I'm going to say pandemic and political, because so much of our pandemic conversation has this incredible left and incredible right political bent to it as well. So I'm going to tie those two together. We are, as a nation, we are polarized. We used to have 5 or 10% of the extremists, and then a bunch of people that would kind of believe one way or the other, and there's 20 or 30% in the middle that kind of went not both ways, but could lean in either direction. We as a society now have taken the extremists to probably 30+%. And then in that last 40%, really a 20 and 20 with very little in the middle. That is true of our politics and the feelings about this pandemic and COVID and what to do. I don't think any of it's bad-hearted. I just think it's a perspective issue, and these damn things have made it worse, because people read stuff on here and they believe it to be true. And it's all geared towards us to reinforce the one side or the other. So I was on the phone day before yesterday, with a lady who's the daughter of an affluent family, and she's done well in business on her own. And she's reaching to me because she wants a divorce. She has 2 16-year-old daughters, and she wants them to be vaccinated. And her husband won't allow it. And it's amplified the rest of the disagreements in their life. So the pressure of this, the amount of anxiety that is experienced, if you were to watch my wife's group that she has on certain social media, or her other group, they're discussing celery juice in the morning and putting their legs up at night before they go to sleep, because their quality of sleep has been less because of the pressures of all this stuff. Anxiety seems to have increased, and now it's, what do we do about that? So all of this, what you saw before the election and afterwards, of the polarization, it isn't like families believe we're all left or we're all right. families have the complete scope, especially as you go through ages that are different. So on the politics, on the pandemic, the having to stay home, should I mask, should I not? I'm in a room without a mask and Ashley has one on. So what you should do about that, should you get a vaccine, should you not, should you be at work, it's all a pressure that gets added to, is the family business just thriving in this because they're in the right segment to thrive? Is the family business almost going out of business and can't give distributions this year and everybody's money is going to be less? Or are they going to distribute and get a loan to do it? Or are they in the middle? Who in the family is working their tail end off to keep it afloat? And who basically is at home at this point taking care of their children or just taking care of their health? So all of these dynamics do no more, no less than exacerbate the underlying issues that they already had, like Kyle and I were talking about before. It's never about what it's about. The underlying issues are exacerbated because of these feelings that they're arguing about. So it's given, what I will say, the consultant world, the counselor world, a lot more opportunity to help because the dysfunction has gone up. Additionally to that, all of us as advisors are facing, are we communicating like this? I do better live than I do by this. I mean, this almost feels like a fax to me because I can't read the energy of the person across from me. Shelly just laughs and grins at me, but we're existing. So I think families are suffering just like your home is, or your extended family or your friends, over the disagreement about politics, the disagreement about what to do about a pandemic, added to, are we making a ton of money? Or are we having to cut back? So when you start to suck the money back as well as how to deal with each other, I think it's exacerbated what normally would be in family business conflict. It has not reduced it by any means. If you were to talk about the things that reduce it, when you have a great economy, lots of money's coming in, we're not in an election year, and people aren't trying to argue with each other, it's easier to overlook the flaw that I have on my face. The way I brush my teeth, the way I roll the toilet paper, squeeze the toothpaste, as well as how I run the business, what time I get home, do we take vacations or not? And my last comment on it would say, Shelly and I were talking a couple of months ago. I miss my business book travel with Shelly because I missed that time I had with Shelly. Oddly enough, our team misses when we traveled for clients or to teach because they got more time. And Shelly's home and my home enjoy it when we're not around as much. Not that they don't love us, but because sometimes acid makes their heart grow fonder. So that's my little take on it. How about you, Kyle?
When we were talking about this yesterday, it was, for me, all it's done is rip the Band-Aid off of the business. You know, just to your point, all the problems that are already there, it just ripped the Band-Aid off and made them ever to the point where they didn't have to deal with it. And, you know, a year ago when this was really coming down and people were starting to, you know, lay off, one of the mistakes I saw that business owners were trying to make is they got rid of the people that they know they should have gotten rid of last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The pandemic was an excuse to make those personnel changes, but they didn't go back and correct why those problems existed in the first place. Either clarifying roles, making sure they're doing the right hires, were they finding the right people? And that's what I saw. Now, as far as some of the unique things to the pandemic, you know, guys, we were talking about supply chain. Every business I've talked to is struggling with supply chain issues right now. For all sorts of reasons that were brought on by the pandemic. And so that's creating a lot of problems for folks. But that would be something that's specific, you know, created by the COVID situation.
Thanks, guys. I know we have just a few minutes left before we open it to questions for everybody. I wanted to ask you both, without giving away your secret sauce and without maybe letting everybody run out into the wild thinking that everybody's now an expert in conflict resolution. What I want to ask you, are there any your successful tactics that you use during these situations to resolve some of these conflicts? Do you guys want to share any of your tactics? Joe, you know, for instance, that care to know, that last 10%, just maybe one or two from each of you to maybe keep everybody's eyes open when they see something going on with their clients?
Jeff, you have to give Joe a time limit, you know that.
Well,
You give an Italian attorney a mic, what do you expect?
Yeah.
How about you first, Kyle?
I would, two things. Everybody wants to feel safe and everybody wants to be heard. Sometimes the most important thing you can do as an advisor is to keep your mouth shut and simply listen. And after they're done dumping all over you, rather than showering them with a bunch of advice, ask them, wow, you've shared a lot. How can I be most helpful to you? And let them guide the conversation. I think the other thing to remember is all of us want to matter. If we can't matter in a positive way, we're going to matter in a negative way, but either way, we have to matter. So keeping those two things in mind as you watch conflict unfold in front of you, if anything, it helps you get more information and helps you suspend the judgment that advisors can be really guilty of, because our clients on the outside seem to be acting crazy when in fact they're acting just as the way their system is running.
As some of you know in the call, and thank you, Kyle, I don't worry about secret sauce or not, or giving away. I personally, all of us are counselors in our business anyways. I happen to have on my card counselor and attorney at law. It used to say attorney and counselor in law, but counseling became the forefront. I was with a fabulous interior designer with Shelley over the weekend. Flamboyant, gorgeous, is opening up, it just bought a factory in Milan. Very dynamic. And she's Yara. And she said, I asked the questions nobody else does. And I said, you're a counselor first. And she lit up and she said, yes. Because even in her business, she counsels first. So let me break down. We took about 20 years ago, Steve and I decompiled our favorite, 17 counselors in the country that dealt with high net worth families and business owners. At the end of the day, it looks something like this. Counseling breaks into first intake. Every human being wants to tell you, if you only understood my situation, you would realize there's no hope. My situation is so unique, there is no hope. And the reason I know that is I've tried to fix it for years and it wasn't fixed. And if there was hope, I would have fixed it because I'm smart and I'm a good steward to my family. So intake, letting them dump on you because they can't dump anymore. With the curiosity of a child, asking the questions and letting them get all of that off their chest. At some point in the conversation, it's a matter of getting them to see something differently of all their facts. You know that all their facts are with bad data from their perspective. As soon as they can say, wait a minute, say that again, or they can see one of their things they know to be true, that it might be some other way, you're now on a good track. So getting it all off their chest. And then if you were on Mars, how would that be different? And they'll say, no, don't trick me. This is the way it is. So it's more intake until they say, oh my gosh, the first moment that they see one of their true facts to be different, now the whole world opens for them. When that does happen, shut up. Let their mind play with it. And then ask questions about that. Commend them for it. Have them describe it. Let them expand into an area they've never done before. They'll walk you into what other help. All counseling does that. I'm sorry, all high mood counseling. Low mood counseling makes you wallow in your crap. So we're not going to do that, which is the larger number of counseling methods, by the way. So next, if you're going to do this, how would you put it into your practice? Number one, you always have a meeting with somebody to determine that something should happen. You have that meeting, you describe a process that has a beginning, 3 middle steps, and an end. So they're not going to buy your product or service. They're going to buy the benefit they're looking for and the process you have. So have a way to say it. Then send them a way to fill something out online, to write something down, to get off their chest so you get level 1 of it. Whether it's what do you love about the company, hate about the company, what would you like to see it doing the next year in open forum, or some other set of questions. Preferably not check the box. And if it was check the box, somewhere to write. Get that stuff, jumble it up, and have it as your first impression. Then hold a joint meeting with 2 people or 20 people and have some set of questions that you can facilitate from. I don't care what they are. just that it gets them to talk and get first impressions on a board. For us, we would do a SWOT analysis plus 5 more. So what does the company do? What is it, which is lines of business, what does it really do? What's its heart and soul? What does the company believe in? A way for them to start think about, is it all about money or something else? How do they define success? How to measure success? Internal strengths, internal weaknesses, external opportunities, external threats. You could have chosen 9, 5, or 12 other questions, but a way for them to brainstorm and put things on a board as a group, and then give them a way to rate. We let them put dots up, 5 dots per category. That way they can see clusters of what they believe in or what they're concerned about. So they're starting to develop consensus. During this process, be very aware that subjects are going to come up that are uncomfortable. Spend time there. Let them talk it through. 90% of the time, they had a big misunderstanding. They say, I never knew you felt that way. At the end of it, let them decide by a rating system what got more votes. The enhancement initiatives that they're going to describe, like Kyle said, they'll describe how you can help, whether it's you or others. Now, Shelley would say, when you have a large group, like a control group and others, you should do the same thing in 2 and compare their notes and then vote. So it's just a matter of giving people a forum. Remember, they want to unload on you that they cannot be helped because they tried for years. You can't be right. I'll pay you to reaffirm that this can't be fixed. The way through that is letting them completely be understood because they want to be heard, like Kyle said, and let them find their moment of the world could be different. Once that happens, they start interacting, and it's like watching popcorn pop. It just all starts to explode up great. I don't mean to sound metaphysical about it. I'm just suggesting the human mind works in a particular way. And their disagreement with each other doesn't have to continue. They just have some basic misunderstandings. How do you get them to be heard and find a joint direction? People like playing together. Families want to like each other if they could just get an apology for what happened when they were 13 years old. Thank you.
That was some great insights there, Joe and Kyle. We really appreciate your time here today. I think listening instead of rushing in to give advice is a really important takeaway for me. And I think too often we're quick to offer a solution before getting the full picture. And we were talking to Joe yesterday, and he was saying the last 10% of discovery is usually the most important part, and usually the part that people don't get to. So I think you have to be patient and let the process play itself out. And, usually there's an underlying reason driving a lot of the actions that these families and business owners are taking. So if we take the time to listen, we can kind of let the owner drive what the next step in the process should be. So just before we go to Q&A, Joe and Kyle, if people are interested in contacting you, can you just tell us what the best way to do that would be?
Email me, Kyle@kyledanner.com. Super easy.
Sure. And for me, it's Joe, J-O-E, at caretoknow, CARETOKNOW.info. And also that website, caretoknow.info, is our platform site for the Institute, Founders Group, which does EPI type stuff, and then our law firm, Strazzeri, Mancini.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Kyle. And just wanted to open it up to anybody if they have any questions.
Gosh, it was so clear and crisp, Kyle. There's not one question. You were great.
Everybody's all running out to go solve all their clients' problems now.
That's what happened. That's what happened, Kyle.
Especially if you're a financial advisor, counseling is your gig. You've been doing it for years. Everything that you've done on financial planning counseling can transfer over to business planning counseling. It's just, instead of their personal finances, the business finance. I think more often than not, you don't need an outside person to help, except when the relationship rises to toxicity, you're gonna need, or if it's in an area outside of your lane, like the business is outside of that. So there's a lot you can do to help their clients on your own by these conversations, take a look at Kyle's website and stuff, or ours, to be able to dig that part, to be able to do a lot of it yourself. And if it reaches toxicity or it's too much, find somebody that will be a good support team to you, not somebody that will take over from you.
No, great closing thoughts. And again, Joe and Kyle, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks,
Jeff
guys.
and Dave, thanks for moderating.
Yeah.
And our next meeting will be Wednesday, June 2nd on the competitive M&A landscape and how it's changed. And we hope you all can make it. So I hope everybody has a great rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you
Yeah.
next year.
All right.
See y'all.
Thanks. Take care, everybody. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Everyone.
Joe. Thanks, Kyle.
Bye.
Thanks, Kyle.